Welcome to Double Double 2 Stories by Ilya Chish. Today we're talking about why Patton assisted a German general following his surrender. Now let me hand it over to my assistant Fred.
Hey everyone, my name is Fred, and I'm Ilya's assistant here at WW2 Stories by Ilya Chij. Today's story is about a decision that saved thousands of lives and revealed a side of General Patton most people never knew existed. Let's dive in. September 1944. Western France, near the Loire River. A German general named Botho Henning Elster faces an impossible choice that will define the rest of his life. He commands nearly 20,000 German troops. Completely cut off, desperately undersupplied, stranded hundreds of miles behind rapidly advancing American lines. They cannot escape back to Germany. They cannot win any battle they fight, but they can still choose to fight and die for absolutely nothing. Elster makes a decision that will save thousands of lives on both sides. He's going to surrender his entire force to American command. But this isn't just any routine surrender of a defeated unit. It's happening deep within George Patton's operational area. And how Patton personally chooses to handle this massive capitulation will send a powerful message to every other surrounded German unit scattered across France. The decision Patton makes reveals a side of the legendary general most people never knew existed. A commander who understood that sometimes respect and adherence to military law accomplishes far more than bullets and bloodshed ever could. This is the story of the largest German surrender to United States forces in Western Europe during the war, and why Patton's calculated response mattered far beyond one general's personal fate. If you want more untold stories from World War II, subscribe to WW2 Stories by Ilya Chiz right now. Drop a comment. What fascinates you most about Patton's command decisions? Or let us know where you're watching from. September 1944. The situation for German forces trapped in Western France had become catastrophic. After the Allied breakout from Normandy in August, Patton's Third Army raced east across France at speeds that shocked even experienced American commanders who thought they understood mobile warfare. German defensive lines collapsed like sandcastles. Supply routes were cut. Entire regions were simply bypassed as American armor drove deep into French territory. General Botho Henning Elster commanded a mixed force of German regular army units and support troops scattered across western France. These weren't elite combat divisions with years of experience. They were occupation forces, garrison units, supply personnel, men trained to hold territory and maintain order, not fight aggressive mobile warfare against experienced American armored columns. And now they were completely cut off from all support. The Loire River was at their backs, a natural barrier. American forces controlled all the viable crossing points. Patton's tanks were positioned between them and Germany. French resistance fighters were actively hunting isolated German units with local knowledge and mounting fury. Allied aircraft dominated the skies completely, making any large-scale movement in daylight absolutely suicidal. Elster faced three options, all of them grim. Option 1. Try to fight their way east to reach German lines still holding in the east. This was militarily impossible from the start. His troops weren't equipped for offensive operations. They'd be systematically destroyed by overwhelming American air power long before reaching any kind of safety. Option 2. Disperse into the countryside and conduct guerrilla warfare against American forces. This would prolong the fighting and cause casualties, but accomplish absolutely nothing strategically. His men would be hunted down methodically, one by well-equipped American forces and vengeful French partisans seeking payback for years of brutal occupation. Option 3. Surrender to American forces. For a German general in 1944, this was far more complicated than it might sound. Hitler had made surrender tantamount to treason against the Reich. Officers who capitulated faced execution if they ever fell back into German hands. Their families could be severely punished under Nazi Germany's ruthless policies of collective responsibility. But Elster was a professional soldier first, not a Nazi party fanatic. He understood military reality with cold clarity. His force had zero strategic value to Germany. Continuing to fight would kill thousands of men, German and American, for absolutely no military purpose whatsoever. The rational decision was crystal clear. The question was whether he could make it without dishonoring himself professionally and condemning his men to potential mistreatment or worse. Elster made initial contact with advancing U.S. forces through careful intermediaries. His message was straightforward but carefully worded. He commanded approximately 20,000 German troops who were willing to surrender to American forces. But he needed certain assurances about their treatment after capitulation. This wasn't an unconditional surrender offered blindly. Elster wanted specific guarantees that his men would be treated according to the Geneva Conventions, that the surrender would be conducted with proper military formality and respect, that his soldiers wouldn't be handed over to French forces, who had every legitimate reason to seek violent revenge against German occupation troops. The request reached commanders in Patton's Third Army headquarters. This was Patton's operational area. Any major surrender had to be personally approved by him. Patton's staff brought the proposal to him for decision. Some officers argued strongly they should demand unconditional surrender with absolutely no conditions or negotiations. Why negotiate with a defeated enemy who had no cards to play? Patton saw the situation completely differently, with characteristic strategic clarity. 20,000 German soldiers removing themselves from the war without firing a single shot. That was an enormous opportunity, not a problem to be resented. Every German who surrendered was one who didn't have to be killed in combat. Every unit that capitulated was territory that didn't need to be fought over building by building. Accepting Elster's reasonable terms cost nothing and gained everything. But there was a much deeper strategic calculation operating in Patton's thinking. How you treat surrendering enemies directly influences whether other enemies choose to surrender when faced with similar circumstances. If German commanders knew capitulation meant humiliation, torture, or execution, they'd fight fanatically to the death. If they knew surrender meant proper treatment according to established military law, they'd rationally choose survival when the tactical situation became completely hopeless. Patton approved the surrender terms. He ordered his subordinates to handle the entire process according to the laws of war. Treat the German soldiers as prisoners of war, entitled to protection under international conventions. No special favors beyond what law required, but also no degrading treatment or revenge. Just proper professional handling of a legitimate military surrender. The message this would send to other surrounded German units scattered across France was worth far more than whatever emotional satisfaction might come from humiliating defeated enemies. September 16, 1944, near the Loire River, nearly 20,000 German troops, an entire division, plus supporting units, marched toward American lines in organized formation. They were disciplined, maintaining order, moving as coherent military units rather than a defeated mob fleeing chaos. At the head of the column, General Botho Henning Elster and his staff officers marched with dignity. United States Army units under Patton's Third Army Command accepted the formal surrender. The process was conducted according to established military protocol with proper ceremony. Elster formally announced the capitulation of his command to American officers. American officers accepted the surrender professionally and without gloating. The German troops were systematically disarmed, organized, and processed for transport to prisoner of war camps. Elster and his officers were treated as what they were, enemy combatants who had chosen honorable surrender over pointless bloodshed. This wasn't charity or kindness. It was adherence to the laws of war that governed how professional armies treated prisoners. But the distinction mattered enormously to everyone involved. American soldiers processing the prisoners treated them firmly but correctly. German soldiers who'd expected harsh treatment or summary execution instead found themselves being fed, given medical attention if needed, and processed through established POW procedures. The contrast with what they'd feared was stark and immediately noticeable, and word spread quickly. Within days, other German units scattered across France knew what had happened. A German general had surrendered 20,000 men to American forces, and everyone had been treated properly. No atrocities, no revenge killings, just professional military conduct according to international law. This was exactly what Patton had understood would happen. Patton never personally met Elster. He wasn't present at the surrender ceremony. He didn't give special treatment beyond what the Geneva Conventions explicitly required. But his decision to approve the surrender terms and ensure proper POW treatment had strategic consequences. that extended far beyond September 1944. In the following months, German units across France surrendered in increasing numbers. Some were small isolated garrisons with no hope. Others were battalion or regiment-sized forces that laid down their arms when they realized continued fighting was tactically pointless. American intelligence officers noticed a clear pattern developing. German commanders specifically requested surrender to American forces rather than other Allied armies. They had heard through various channels that Americans followed the laws of war and treated prisoners properly. Elster's surrender became the standard example cited repeatedly. German officers mentioned it specifically in surrender negotiations. Word had spread through Wehrmacht communication networks about the general who capitulated with 20,000 men, and everyone was treated correctly according to military law. This had concrete military value that could be measured. Every German soldier who surrendered was one fewer enemy to fight. Every unit that capitulated was territory secured without costly battle. Every commander who chose surrender over fanatical resistance was American lives saved. The cumulative effect shortened the campaign in France significantly and reduced casualties on both sides. Patton's pragmatic decision to treat surrendering enemies according to military law created conditions that actively encouraged more surrenders. It was strategic thinking operating at a level most commanders never even considered. But there was something else in Patton's approach that reveals his character beyond tactics. Despite his aggressive reputation for relentless attack, Patton genuinely respected professional soldiers, even enemy ones. He despised Nazi ideology utterly and had no mercy for SS units or hardcore party fanatics. But professional Wehrmacht officers who served according to military tradition, Patton saw them as fellow warriors who happened to wear different uniforms. When those professional soldiers made the rational decision to surrender rather than die for nothing, Patton believed they deserved to be treated according to the laws that governed honorable warfare. This wasn't sentiment or softness. It was Patton's fundamental worldview. Wars were fought by soldiers following orders. And when those soldiers chose honorable surrender, they should be treated honorably. After surrendering, General Elster and his troops were processed through normal prisoner of war channels. Elster spent the remainder of the war in American POW camps. By all accounts, he was cooperative and conducted himself as a professional officer who'd made a difficult but necessary decision. He was treated as enemy officers were supposed to be treated under international law, detained but not abused, separated from enlisted men as regulations required, but provided appropriate conditions. After the war ended, Elster faced a different kind of trial. The German government put him on trial for surrendering his command. Under Nazi military law, capitulation without fighting to the last man was considered desertion or treason. But the post-war German court recognized reality. Elster's situation in September 1944 had been completely hopeless. Continuing to fight would have accomplished nothing except needless deaths. His decision to surrender had been the only rational choice available. Elster was pardoned. He lived quietly in post-war Germany, deliberately avoiding publicity. When asked about his decision, he maintained it had been correct given the military circumstances, and he always acknowledged one thing, that American forces had treated him and his men according to the laws of war, made the surrender possible. If he believed capitulation meant execution or torture, he might have felt compelled to fight on, not because he expected victory, but because military honor would have demanded it. The professional treatment he received from Patton's forces gave him the ability to make the right decision. Elster's surrender was one of the largest German capitulations to U.S. forces in World War II. Nearly 20,000 soldiers removed from combat in a single action without a shot fired. The strategic value was enormous, but the broader significance lies in what it reveals about military leadership and strategic thinking. Patton is remembered for aggressive tactics, bold attacks, and relentless pursuit of the enemy. All true. But the Elster surrender shows another dimension of his command philosophy. He understood that how you treat defeated enemies shapes the behavior of enemies not yet defeated. Respect the laws of war, treat prisoners properly, and rational enemy commanders will choose surrender when their situation becomes hopeless. Abuse or execute prisoners, And even defeated enemies will fight to the death because they have nothing to lose. This isn't weakness, it's strategic sophistication. Modern military doctrine has codified this insight. POW treatment, Geneva Conventions, laws of armed conflict. These aren't just humanitarian concerns. They're strategic tools that encourage enemy surrender and reduce the cost of victory. Patton understood this in 1944, 70 years before it became standard counterinsurgency doctrine. The decision to approve Elster's surrender and ensure proper treatment wasn't mercy. It was calculated strategy that happened to align with treating people according to established military law. And it worked. German surrenders increased across France as word spread that American forces followed the rules. The story of Botho Henning Elster's surrender teaches something that transcends World War II. In any conflict, the goal isn't just winning battles. It's ending the war with minimum cost in lives and resources. Sometimes that means destroying the enemy in combat, but sometimes it means giving them a rational alternative to fighting to the death. Elster faced annihilation if he fought, and honorable captivity if he surrendered. The choice was obvious, but only because Patton ensured the honorable option actually existed. If American forces had a reputation for murdering prisoners or violating the laws of war, Elster might have chosen desperate resistance. His 20,000 troops would have fought. American soldiers would have died clearing them out. Weeks would have been wasted on battles that served no strategic purpose. Instead, Patton's adherence to military law created conditions where the rational choice was surrender. 20,000 enemies removed from the war without firing a shot. Territory secured without casualties. Resources saved for the push into Germany. That's strategic genius operating on a level most people never see. September 1944. General Botho Henning Elster surrendered nearly 20,000 German troops to U.S. forces advancing through France. George Patton, commanding the Third Army, approved the surrender and ordered his forces to handle it according to the laws of war. No special treatment, no favors beyond what international law required, just professional military conduct toward defeated enemies who'd chosen an honorable surrender. The decision saved thousands of lives on both sides. It encouraged other German units to surrender when their situations became hopeless. It demonstrated that American forces followed the rules, even when fighting Nazi Germany. Elster survived the war, faced trial in Germany for surrendering, and was pardoned when courts recognized he'd made the only rational decision available. The 20,000 men he surrendered went home to their families instead of dying in pointless combat. And Patton's reputation, already legendary for aggressive warfare, gained another dimension. A commander sophisticated enough to understand that sometimes following the laws of war accomplishes more than breaking them. This story matters because it reveals a truth about warfare that many people miss. The most effective commanders aren't always the most ruthless. Sometimes they're the ones who understand that discipline, law, and professional conduct are weapons as powerful as tanks and artillery. Patton knew when to attack and when to accept surrender, when to destroy the enemy, and when to give them a rational path to capitulation. That's not weakness. That's military leadership at its highest level. If you found this story compelling, subscribe to World War II Stories by Ilya Chiz right now. We explore the strategic decisions that changed World War II in ways most history books completely miss. Comment below. Do you think Patton's approach to POW treatment was strategic brilliance or just following basic military law? And let us know where you're watching from. Remember, sometimes the smartest move in war isn't pulling the trigger. It's giving the enemy a reason not to.